When the small, trembling voice said, "You dropped this, sir," Michael Turner, one of the most powerful CEOs in New York, barely looked up from his phone. But the moment his eyes landed on the delicate gold locket in the little girl's hand, the world around him stopped. His chest constricted, his breath caught, because that locket had been buried with his late wife 3 years ago. Michael Turner was a man who had everything: money, status, and a company that had become an empire. But those who looked closer, or dared to look past the polished suits and the steel glare, could see it. The hollow look in his eyes, the kind that belonged to a man who had lost something he could never get back. He had been a different man once. A husband, a believer in love and simple things. Before the accident, before the rainy night that took Emma away from him, Michael had known warmth. Her laughter had filled their home, her optimism had softened his edges, and her love had made the world seem kind. But after she was gone, he shut it all out, every color, every song, every memory. He filled his life with meetings, deadlines, and noise. Because silence, to him, was unbearable. Silence reminded him of her absence. That morning was one of those mornings where the world moved like clockwork. He strode into Turner Tower with his usual purpose, the marble floors echoing his footsteps. Employees greeted him with polite smiles that he didn't return. He didn't even notice. He was reading a message about an upcoming merger, mind consumed by numbers, forecasts, and projected profits. Then something soft brushed against his shoe. He looked down, irritated, and saw a small hand holding out something that caught the light. "Excuse me, sir," a little voice said. "You dropped this." He frowned, lowering his phone. It was a girl, tiny, no more than 7 or 8. Her dark hair was tied back with a faded ribbon, and she wore an oversized janitor's uniform that clearly wasn't hers. The sleeves hung past her wrists, and her sneakers were scuffed. Yet her eyes, large, brown, full of innocence, were steady as she held something out to him. It was a gold locket. Michael's world seemed to tilt. He knew that locket. He knew every detail of it. The small dent on one side, the faint scratches along the chain. He had bought it for Emma on their 3rd anniversary. She had worn it every day until the day she didn't come home. His heart pounded in his chest. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice coming out more harshly than he intended. The little girl flinched, taking a small step back. I found it last night," she said quietly. "When I was helping my dad clean the 22nd floor. It was behind a vent. I thought maybe it was yours." Her small fingers trembled as she handed it to him. Michael's hand shook as he reached for it. The moment his skin touched the metal, a flood of memories hit him. Emma's laughter as she leaned against him on their balcony, the way her hair caught the morning light, the sound of her voice whispering, "Always find your way back to me." The engraving on the back confirmed it. "Always find your way back to me." His throat tightened painfully. "What did you say your father's name was?" "Mr. Harris," she answered softly. "He works here at night." Mr. Harris. The name rang faintly familiar. A janitor. Michael had approved his employment contract years ago. He'd never met the man in person. Before he could say anything more, a voice called out across the lobby, "Lila. What are you doing over there?" An older man in a worn blue uniform hurried toward them, clearly out of breath. His hair was graying at the temples, and fatigue lined his face, but his eyes were kind. When he saw who his daughter was speaking to, his expression turned alarmed. "Mr. Turner, I am so sorry, sir. She didn't mean to bother you." Michael barely heard him. He couldn't take his eyes off the locket. His pulse roared in his ears. "Mr. Harris," he said, finally finding his voice, "your daughter says she found this on the 22nd floor." The man nodded, hesitating. "Yes, sir. In the conference room vent. She likes to help me after school, and she saw something shiny stuck in there. I was going to hand it into Lost and Found, but she insisted it might belong to someone important." Michael stared at him. The 22nd floor, Emma's floor. It was where her old design office had been before he'd converted it into a meeting space. His hand tightened around the locket. "That was my wife's," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to Harris or to himself. The janitor's face softened. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize." Lila tilted her head. "Was she special to you?" she asked innocently. Michael blinked, caught off guard by the question. The girl's voice was gentle, almost too pure for the place they were standing. She was. His voice cracked. He looked down at the locket again. She was everything. Lila smiled a little, as though she understood more than her years should allow. Then I'm glad I found it. Daddy says sometimes the things we lose find us again when we need them most. Her words pierced him in a way no business deal, no shareholder threat ever could. Before he could respond, the janitor gently pulled her back. Come on, sweetheart. Mr. Turner has work to do. But as they turned to leave, the girl looked over her shoulder and said softly, it's pretty. You must have loved her a lot. Michael's chest ached. He wanted to tell her yes, that he still did, that he'd never stopped. But the words refused to come. He just nodded faintly and watched as she disappeared through the staff doors. He stood in the lobby long after they left, staring down at the locket as if afraid it would vanish again. Later that night, he didn't stay in the office. He didn't take the company car or the usual route home. Instead, he walked through the rain, hands in his pockets, the locket clutched tightly in one of them. His penthouse apartment felt colder than usual. He sat on the couch, flicked on the lamp, and opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside was the same tiny photograph of him and Emma from their wedding day. Her smile, radiant and alive, seemed to glow beneath the glass. For the first time in years, Michael felt something stir, a pain so sharp it nearly took his breath away. He remembered that morning before the accident. She'd kissed him goodbye, teasing him for being too serious. You'll lose that smile of yours, Mr. CEO, she'd said, tapping his nose. Don't forget to find your way back to me. That had been the last thing she ever said to him. Now, 3 years later, her locket, buried with her, was back in his hands. How? He whispered into the empty room. How is this possible? His reflection in the dark window stared back at him, a man who looked powerful but broken, successful but lonely. He thought about the little girl's words again. The things we lose find us again when we need them most. Was it a coincidence? Or something more? Michael leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time since Emma's death, he didn't feel completely alone. The ache in his chest wasn't gone, but it was softer now, mixed with something else. Something like hope. The next morning, he didn't go straight to his meeting. He called HR instead. I want to speak with one of our janitors, he said. Mr. Harris, and his daughter, Lila. Of course, sir, the assistant replied, surprised. Should I schedule it after lunch? No, Michael said firmly. Now. He ended the call and looked at the locket on his desk, its gold surface catching the light. The engraving shimmered faintly. Always find your way back to me. And for the first time in 3 years, Michael Turner, CEO, widower, and man who had forgotten how to feel, began to believe that maybe, somehow, Emma was helping him do exactly that. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of loss and guilt, a spark flickered. And he didn't know it yet, but that little girl with the big brown eyes and the janitor's uniform was about to reignite his entire life. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the glass lobby of Turner Industries, Michael Turner, once known for his cold efficiency, did something that left his entire staff whispering. The CEO who never waited for anyone was standing by the fountain, looking expectant. When the janitor and his daughter arrived, the moment that followed would not only change his life, it would heal the part of him he thought was gone forever. Michael hadn't been able to sleep the night before. The locket rested on his bedside table, glinting faintly under the lamplight, as if watching over him. He'd opened it again and again, running his thumb over Emma's smiling face, remembering the scent of her perfume, the sound of her laughter echoing down their old hallway. But this time, the memories didn't crush him. They held him gently. For the first time since the accident, he didn't wake up with dread. Instead, he rose early, dressed with quiet purpose, and found himself heading not to the boardroom, but to the lobby. Employees stared in shock as the famously stoic CEO stood there, waiting near the fountain, looking almost human. He didn't bark orders. He didn't check his phone. He simply waited. At precisely 8:30, the janitor, Mr. Harris, entered with his daughter. She was holding his hand, her tiny legs struggling to keep up with his long strides. When she spotted Michael, she broke into a small, bright smile that instantly softened the man's heart. "Hello again, sir," she said, her voice gentle but confident. "Good morning, Lila," Michael said, kneeling so he was at her level. "I've been waiting for you." Her eyes widened a little. "For me, yes," he smiled, the expression foreign but genuine. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. And I wanted to give you something too." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and handed it to her. Her father looked uncomfortable. "Sir, you really don't have to." "I do," Michael said softly. "Please." Lila opened the box carefully, her eyes lighting up. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a star. It sparkled under the lobby lights. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "My wife used to tell me," Michael said, his voice quiet but steady, "that stars remind us that the people we love never really leave us. They're just shining somewhere else." Lila smiled, her eyes bright. "That's what my mommy used to say too." Her father's lips trembled, but he said nothing. Michael looked at him and nodded respectfully. "You've raised an extraordinary daughter." The janitor swallowed hard. "She's all I've got left." Michael looked at the bracelet still in Lila's hands. "Then she's a treasure worth more than anything money can buy." The girl's small voice broke the silence. "Can I hug you, Mr. Turner?" He hesitated. Michael Turner, who hadn't let anyone touch him since the day of the funeral. But before he could answer, she wrapped her arms around his neck. The contact was warm, soft, pure. Something inside him cracked open, and he found himself closing his eyes, feeling, for the first time in years, something that felt like peace. When she pulled back, she grinned. "See, you don't look sad anymore." He laughed quietly, the sound surprising him. "Maybe that's your magic," she giggled, pleased. After that morning, something shifted in Michael's world. He began to notice things he had long ignored. The way his employees smiled nervously when he passed, the tired faces of the cleaning crew who came in after hours, the small kindnesses happening all around him that he'd been too blind to see. He started eating lunch in the cafeteria occasionally, where he'd talk to people he once only walked past. Sometimes, Lila and her father would be there, and she'd wave at him from across the room, proudly showing him her school drawings. One afternoon, she ran up to him holding a crayon picture, a tall man standing beside a little girl under a sky full of stars. "That's you and me," she said. "And those are the stars where our mommies live." Michael's throat tightened. He took the picture carefully and smiled. "Then we'll keep them shining, right? Always," she said. Weeks passed, and the seasons changed. But inside Turner Industries, the atmosphere began to shift. Employees whispered that Mr. Turner was different now, kinder, gentler, as if something had touched his heart. He started a new program, one that stunned the board members, the Bright Futures Initiative, a scholarship fund for the children of janitors, maintenance workers, and other overlooked staff. When asked why, he simply said, "Because talent shouldn't depend on the size of a paycheck. Sometimes the smallest hands hold the biggest dreams." The first scholarship went, of course, to Lila Harris. When the day of the announcement arrived, the company's event hall was packed. Reporters filled the front rows, cameras flashing as Michael took the stage in his usual dark suit. But this time, there was no cold detachment in his eyes, only warmth. Beside him stood Lila, wearing a simple blue dress and her silver bracelet. Her small hand clutched his as he addressed the crowd. "3 years ago," Michael began, his voice carrying through the hall, "I lost someone I loved deeply. I thought that pain would never fade. I buried not just my wife, but every piece of who I was. I became a man who lived only for numbers, deals, and deadlines." He paused, looking down at Lila, who smiled up at him encouragingly. "But then," he continued softly, "a little girl found something I thought was gone forever, a locket that belonged to my wife. She didn't just return an object. She returned hope." The room was silent. "She reminded me," he said, his voice thickening, "that love doesn't end when life does. It just changes shape. It shows up in unexpected places, through unexpected people. Sometimes, all it takes is kindness from a stranger, or a child, to help us find our way back." The crowd erupted into quiet applause, many brushing away tears. As the ceremony ended, Michael leaned down to Lila. "You did wonderfully," he whispered. She beamed. I didn't even say anything. You didn't have to, he said softly. You've already said enough. As they stepped off the stage, she tugged at his sleeve. Mr. Turner. Yes. She leaned closer, whispering, I told my daddy that mommy came to me in a dream last night. She said the stars are brighter now because you smiled again. Michael froze, his breath catching. For a moment, the noise of the crowd faded, and all he could hear was the echo of Emma's voice, the one he thought he'd never hear again. He looked down at the locket around his neck and felt something unexplainable stir inside him. Tell her, he whispered back, voice trembling, that I found my way home. Lila smiled, then looked up toward the ceiling, as if seeing something no one else could. She heard you. As they walked off stage, hand in hand, Michael felt lighter. The grief that had once chained him to his past no longer felt like a weight. It felt like a memory he could finally carry with love instead of pain. That night, back in his penthouse, he placed the locket by the window and looked out at the sky. It was full of stars, bright, endless, alive. Somewhere, somehow, he felt her there. And in the reflection of the glass, just beside his own, he thought he saw her smile again. He smiled back, because at last, Michael Turner had found what Emma had always promised him. He had found his way back.